Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Oh, we've already got people here that thought we were going to do a thing that we were just trying to set up. We hadn't even got anywhere near that yet. So, Rambai, how you doing? How is everyone? We've only just gone live. And I was really struggling. I was trying to get it to work on my Mac, but I can't get the iPhone to connect to it. But yes, this is not a premiere, Saran. This is us. We are here live. How is everyone? Let me know down in the chat if you can hear me, if you can see me, all of that good stuff. Is it all working for you? I take everything up. How are we? I've just sent the link over to Apple tomorrow, and here he is. Add to the stream. Boom. How are we doing?
Hey everyone.
How is everyone today? Let me know down in the live chat what was the most exciting thing for you guys at Spring Loaded. I know we're still flogging this dead horse, but still, let's keep talking about it. I'm just going to try and find up my notes from actually what was released at the event, and we are going to go through a whole bunch of stuff. But Saran Bites in the chat. We've got iTech, everything in the chat. Werner Weiss in the chat. Who else have we got? We've got 12 people watching, as many as that. Tech Hype, I don't know if he's still here or if he's given up on us. Which I can't blame him if he did. Apparently, it told everyone that the thing was going live a bit earlier, but it's here. My audio is not the best. That's because that's because
we're going through StreamYard.
Let's try it like that. How's that? Is that any better for you guys?
And what about mine? Let me know about mine as well.
It's a bit echoey, but we're okay. I think we'll be all right. Werner, is that any better? AirPods suck when you put them through the wash and dried them in a tumble dryer. That's why they suck. But there we go. Yeah, we're having to do the StreamYard actually on my iPhone because I cannot get my Mac to connect to my phone to use it as a camera right now for some reason. It only wants to use one style, but there we go. We're here. We might as well have a chat. Let's do it. So I've got actually my notes up from Spring Loaders. We had a bunch of stuff that was released. So we had iOS 14.5 was announced. We had Apple Card with Apple Card Family, which means nothing to most of the people watching this stream, I don't think. We had, what was the other services? Oh, podcast subscriptions.
Podcast Plus, yeah.
So that's exciting. It's not Podcast Plus. Don't you get the name wrong, Sard. It's just called podcast subscriptions.
All right.
Individual. There's not like a subscription that you get a whole bunch of stuff for. It's individual podcasts. There's a new podcast creator portal that they've created, and I think it's £20 or $20 a year to be a member of that, and then you can get subscriptions within your podcast. So that's pretty cool.
All right.
And then what else did we have? We had the Apple TV. We had AirTags. We had what was that? There was a Mac of some sort, I think.
It was an iMac.
And then there was the pointless iPad Pro with M1. So, what was your favorite thing that we saw, Sad?
Well, I guess for me it has to be the iMac because I've been looking forward to seeing what they do with the Apple Silicon version of the iMac, and for me it's kind of a marvel of engineering to see something so thin and light and still have the performance of stuff that isn't so thin and light, such as my noisy render rig as well. So that iMac is, it's definitely a lot faster than my setup, and my setup isn't what you call minimalist in any way because it's like a huge PC. So that's noisy. So that's what really impresses me the most, to see that something so thin and light can now be so powerful as well. So
very nice. So for me it was the iMac as well. There's been a lot of hate. What is all this hate about for the iMac? I think it's awesome.
The white bezels, it's throwing people off, and the chin, they say still keeping around the chin, but I see the use of the chin there because it lets the device be thin and beautiful and elegant, and it has a purpose, right? apart from just the engineering wise, it makes the product look iconic and recognizable,
Yeah,
instantly recognizable, because in movies or videos, wherever you see an something with a chain and black bezels, you see it, you know it's an iMac, right? So yeah, it's the recognizability factor as well as the engineering. So
yeah, and I see in the chat there, iTech Everything's just said, pretty sure it's because of the leaks that everyone's disappointed. But there weren't
I agree.
leaks for these coloured bezels. There weren't leaks for the design at all. We just heard that it was going to be about a 24-inch display. This was something that came out from the supply chain like over a year ago, right? The 24-inch size. But yeah, as Sarambite is saying, like the expectations were set. They weren't set by leaks though. They were set by expectation, not. I don't think anyone said that it was going to be bezel-less. People said it's going to look a bit more like an iPad Pro, and then everyone assumed that the whole thing all the way around was going to be bezel-less, but that's not what was meant. I think it's the thinness that they were talking about.
Yeah, and I think
from the side.
I think it's this exactly is the reason Apple doesn't like leaks at all, maybe because you know, we take different sort of inferences from anything a leaker says, and sometimes whatever a leaker says can be ambiguous, or you know, it isn't well defined, sort of the direction that they want to take with it. So when you know, such as in the iMac's case, of course, when people said it's going to be like flat sides like a Pro Display XDR, and it's going to be like a larger iPad just on a stand. So people just sort of drew inferences saying that it's going to have flat sides and it's going to be like an iPad. So yeah, you know, rounded corners of the iPad with the flat sides, and it obviously set some really high expectations.
Yeah,
and I think
I think.
Huh?
I think I would have liked the rounded corners. I think that would have just been another thing that kind of sets the iMac apart from the other stuff out there. Just to have that kind of design look. I know that there were renders out there, but there were renders from everyone, and I don't think anyone particularly paid too much attention to like whose renders they were looking at, and then other people would work like jam on other people's renders, so it was all kind of just building on its own kind of hype, and not necessarily that much of it being pushed through. Yeah, that's a good point in the chat there. I just missed who said it, but that if it was called the iMac Air, then people might have been cool with it. You know, because then that kind of suggests that there's more coming down the line, which we all know that there is more coming down the line anyway.
Yeah, obviously,
But yeah, just maybe that name might have given it a little bit of a different kind of expectation on what was coming. But yeah, I think the iMac looks great, to be completely honest. The one thing that I'm not sure on is why they didn't bother putting a logo on the front, but I almost think it's because that design with the display and the bar at the bottom, the chin, has become iconic enough on its own that you don't need the Apple logo there to recognize it. And I think that in a lot of TV shows, they'll remove it. They'll kind of put a piece of, I don't know if it's just silver vinyl or something across the front, so that it's still got the design, but it doesn't have the logo, so they're not having to worry about whether it looks like promotion. But I don't think there's any copyright to it. Like anyone, if you buy an iMac, you can put it in a thing that you're doing. But if you don't want it to be kind of promoting Apple, I guess maybe you kind of, that's what a lot of people do. And you see a lot of the old
sponsorship look, right?
Yeah, and you get a lot of the older TV shows that would put like a globe or something over the glowing apple, so that kind of the globe glows and things like that. So there's clever ways around it, but still, I do think that the iMac design, having that chin on the bottom, is iconic. And actually, when people are saying like they could have just made it a little bit thicker and put the computer inside, they would have had to like double the thickness, because that computer is not something that you can spread out across the back. It's a board and a couple of fans, and the fans are as thick as they are. And if they've made the chassis as thin as it can be for that display, then that makes sense. But we are going to have one on the way. My dad is buying one of these of the current iMac because he's been waiting to upgrade. He's got a 2011 that he's still using with a mechanical hard drive. So that's getting quite long in the tooth. That's one of the ones that was thicker as well. That was still with the optical drives inside. So yeah, that's definitely going to be on the way, and I will find a way to get to it to have a look.
Yeah, that would be.
He lives about 200 miles away, but apart from that,
all right,
we'll work it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so the other kind of huge announcement obviously was the iPad Pro with
Uh-huh.
M1. What are your thoughts on that one? Because obviously I made a fairly controversial clickbaity titled video yesterday about my
Yeah.
thoughts. So let me know, what do you think?
Well, I think certainly the potential is there now. It was there before, but now it's like out in the open. You know, when you call the chip M1, and the M1 is basically a chip that you've put in a laptop as well. So if you would have called it A14X, some people would have been thrown off and said that the A14X is kind of like a lower performance version of the M1, which still the M1 in the iPad Pro is going to be a bit lower performance than that in a Mac, right? Because they're going to maybe pull down the wattage just a tad or bit. Well, we'll see, right? We'll see with the benchmarks and stuff. But
Yeah.
what I think is now they have absolutely no excuse of not bringing Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro over to the iPad, right? So I think they've successfully sort of told people that the next WWDC is going to bring some major advances to the iPad, and maybe they're going to give now sort of software exclusive to the iPad Pro. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really impressed. The mini LED display, of course, so better than an LCD, almost OLED level, but without the problems. It's a win-win, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So I think the big reason that they've changed the branding and gone to M1 is actually not to make it sound like it's a laptop level one, but I think they've done it because when these Pro apps come, they will say you need an iPad with an M series processor inside to run it,
Yes.
as opposed to saying you need something that is this generation or newer. It will be an easy way for them to say you need an M series iPad, so you're able to run it. So people won't expect that they can run it on an iPad Air, which obviously looks the same as the iPad Pro 11-inch, or on a base level iPad. That will be probably the easiest way that they can talk about it in a simple way for people to know, because A14 is M1. A14X, sorry, is the
It is
M1.
M1,
Like
yes.
when Luke Miani did his predictions for what A14 would perform like, he was within like 1%, 1 to 2%, and that was before the A14 even arrived. So he just absolutely nailed it in terms of what the architecture would be and what the performance would be based on the previous ones. So when people think to themselves, "Oh, it's a massive jump because they put M1 in it," no, it's not. It's the same. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
but it will be what they use to differentiate the kind of the pro version of the iPad going forward, and it just makes it a lot easier for people to understand. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
going to be, and this
It's
is what I'm
easier. It
excited.
works better with marketing, of course.
Mhm.
They're gonna, like I said, they're gonna put software exclusive now for the iPad Pro. So Pro apps like Final Cut and stuff are gonna be Pro exclusive.
Mm-hmm. But again, we've got kind of Surroundbyte saying, "Oops, sorry, dropping stuff over here." Surroundbyte saying M1 is so overkill for iPad OS. Yeah, it is. But
Yeah, in
if
its
they
current
did,
state, yes.
but if they'd put out A14X and it performed exactly the same way as M1, we wouldn't be having that discussion. We would just say, well, this is the new version. And A12X was overkill for an iPad at the time, and then A12Z was overkill for an iPad at the time. So it doesn't make a huge difference. But Surroundbyte thinks that older iPad Pros and Air 4 will get supported. I'm wondering if there will be a like Final Cut Pro version that comes out, and certain features then maybe are exclusive to the Pros with M1.
I
I
don't
do
think
just
so.
think
I don't think so. I
no.
think they're going to be fully supported on the Pro models, and then no sort of remnant of the Final Cut Pro is going to be on lower end iPads or older iPad Pros. I
Mm,
think it's going to be the newest M1 and onwards
yeah,
Pro exclusive, and no sort of smaller Final Cut for smaller iPads.
fair enough. Cool.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
going
I
to be
mean,
exclusive.
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. To be fair, and I know like Tim's saying here, certainly wouldn't want to run Logic Pro on an iPad. But
Why?
again, if the iPad is basically what is doing all of the work, and then you've got an external display, and you're using your iPad for sliders, for levels, and you've got a keyboard and trackpad with it as well, or any of the other peripherals that you would have, I can see how that would work. I do know that there's a lot of stuff around. People are asking for how to make external displays work better with iPad, and that's one of the tricky things for me, because I know now we've put Thunderbolt in it, and now we've got all of that stuff. I just wonder if there's going to be, like, it's difficult because you can't have another app on your external display with an iPad unless you've got keyboard and trackpad or keyboard and mouse control, because obviously you can't just poke another display. It's not going to work the same way as your iPad does, and that's the one thing that kind of is a tricky thing for having the external display support, which everyone keeps asking for, but nobody seems to have kind of understood how
like
that
I
would
said, there is no excuse now for Apple to not make this work. They have the same port as they have on their Macs now on the iPad. They have the same processor they have on the Mac now on the iPad. So I mean, there's no excuse, like I said. So I think with WWDC they're going to be patching a lot of that, the bridge between the Mac and the iPad. And it's going to get a lot of people talking once again about, are they merging iPad OS and Mac OS, which they're not. But
yeah, I agree, and that's the thing. I don't think they'll do that. But my wondering is, are they going to release an external display with touch support that's also then got a hub built into it? So you plug in your iPad into your external display, and then you've also got more ports built into that display so that you can add things like we just had mentioned in the chat, audio interfaces and that kind of thing. So if you've got MIDI instruments that you want to add or anything along those lines, then that would be something else that could be something that would come along and make a lot of sense, especially as they've now got the new panels for the new iMacs. Like, I do think an external display is coming. I think we've seen some leaks to that end as well.
Yeah, for that lower end sort of display. So maybe it has touch support, but is smaller and maybe cheaper than a Pro display. And maybe the stand comes included with the price. That's like a wild card, right?
I mean, that's a bit crazy at this point. I think including a stand with a display so you're actually able to use that display, I mean, that's pushing things a little bit.
Like peak generosity right there.
I mean, I've seen some people that have literally bought the Pro Display XDR and just leaned it up against their wall on a desk. I mean, that seems a little risky to me.
All right.
just at least buy the VESA mount so you can have it.
So like someone in the chat has pointed out that the RAM increase as well, from going from 6 gigabytes to 16 gigabytes. And yes, I agree, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Certainly.
I mean, I don't think you're going to need the 16 gig version in order to run these Pro apps at all. I think it will help if you're doing heavy workflows with it.
I think, I'm not sure, but I think under 1 terabyte is now upgraded from 6 to 8 gigabytes, and then 1 and 2. So, like I said, it's a Mac now. It's a Mac. It's a full Mac.
Yeah, but with iPad OS.
But with iPad OS. So what I see happening is iPad OS becoming touch-based Mac OS. With all the same apps and stuff, but now touch-based and heavily optimized for touch interface.
Yeah, because it will be still full screen or split screen. I don't think you're going to have movable windows within iPad OS. That just doesn't make sense to me. But I do think you're right. I think touch is probably going to come to Macs this year. I do think if they're going to release a new display, then they might as well include touch with it, because they're so good at doing multi-touch now. Like being able to use a display with your Mac, even if you're just, rotating an image on the screen, things like that every so often. So your main interface is still keyboard, mouse, trackpad, and then you're able to just manipulate things when you need to. Because that would also tie in then with what we're probably going to see in terms of AR stuff going down the line as well. When we get to manipulating stuff in the air, being able to train your users to be able to manipulate stuff on a Mac screen will then work well when they're able to manipulate stuff in kind of 3D space using AR gloves or something along those lines as well.
With about the AR glasses though, I think they're gonna for us in the beginning, obviously, it's going to be very weird to sort of be doing gestures in the air, right? For people who don't know about AR glasses yet, so they're going to be like, is this guy crazy or what? So yeah, because we're going to be doing all sorts of gestures in the air. So maybe Apple has some sort of device that you use to control windows in the air, but It's going to be
Possibly.
very interesting to see what they do, especially with the typing interface. Like if you're
Hmm.
typing something like a text, it's going to be interesting to see what they come up with.
To be honest, I think anything that's typing wise is just going to be using Siri for dictation. That just makes far more sense when you're using the glasses. However, I don't know if you guys, anyone in the chat, watches the TV show The Resident. Let me know in the chat if you've watched it. But in season 3, they had like this massive episode that was integrated with Microsoft for HoloLens 2 when that was released.
Mm-hmm.
And they were showing basically kind of 3D holograms because they were showing what the guys would be seeing inside their visors. And they were showing these kind of 3D holograms and things moving around above a patient so that they could check stuff that was internal using cameras and AR. And by all accounts, from what I can find online, this seems to be actually very realistic to how the experience would be. And I was absolutely blown away by it. And if that's
Mm-hmm.
what Microsoft are doing with HoloLens, which I know is a very expensive system, I have a feeling that that Apple will be able to do very similar stuff with Apple Glass, and they're going to be trying to push it towards that kind of thing. And I'm like, I haven't really followed AR in general very much,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I think this is something that is going to be like game changing, and people don't realize what it's going to be like at the moment. We're kind of
Yeah.
thinking, oh, you're going to get notifications like on an Apple Watch, and actually it could be like really, really compelling. But like
Mm-hmm.
we just don't know what's going to go into the goggle style that they're doing first, and then what's going to go into actual glasses and things like that. It's very, very strange. Like it's. I don't think people realize the kind of level of stuff that's going to
Yeah.
happen with this, and
Yeah.
I don't either.
Mm-hmm.
I know we just had a message in the chat that was, I think, Tim, maybe. Let me see if I can actually scroll. Tim Beaton. I simply don't want dongles hubs attached to an iPad in order to make it work with Logic/Final Cut Pro. Why would I when all the ports will be on a Mac? Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I think with what we're trying to say here is in terms of if you want the Pro apps to work well on these systems, because a lot of people are now moving over to an iPad as their main system instead of having a Mac because they prefer the touch interface most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to then dock that and turn it into a desktop style system, I think would make sense. You would need to plug it into something to run Logic in a useful way, but you would be able to take your project home with you on it and be able to at least play it back or make quick adjustments. I think that's kind of the way that it
I
will work,
think
and there will be different interfaces.
I think it won't be like it's just the way it is on a Mac, right? And for people to have to plug in more like microphones and other interfaces, so you can easily attach like one adapter to it. So
Mm-hmm.
for work, and if you have an iMac, you can do most of the work there, and then do some of the work on your iPad where you don't need as many attachments. So
Mm-hmm.
it's doable. I think some people are really against the idea of just having even one dongle, but I'm comfortable with it.
No, I do get it, and like it's not going to be for everyone, but there are certainly going to be some people that do prefer to use it this way, and that's absolutely fine. And we're just going to give a shout out to your brother who's in the chat saying hello.
Oh,
How exciting is that? Look, you're famous
all
now.
right.
Even your family know who you
Yeah.
are. But Tim, yeah, I do get what you're saying 100%, and I know it's not going to be for everyone, but I'm just saying that this is going to be something that they're adding. It's not going to be that they're going to get rid of it on the Mac and bring it only to iPad, obviously, and I know that you understand that. But giving people the options for these things kind of works as well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what else did we have at the event? We had AirTags. How excited are you about AirTags?
AirTags. Well, how excited can you be about like a tracking device? It's
Well,
I
what
don't
my
lose
audience,
stuff as much as other people do, so maybe I'm not part of the group of people that want AirTags.
yeah,
But certainly the integration with Apple's ecosystem is the main compelling point, right?
yeah,
Because with Tile, of course, you don't have that level of integration with Apple and other devices. So
mm-hmm,
even Android devices. So what Apple's game or sort of plan here is to attract people to the AirTags solely due to their tight integration with other Apple's devices, and their ability to sort of use other devices and then track the location and ping each sort of beacon of.
Oh, you're breaking up for me. I don't know if it is for everyone else. But yeah, I've ordered one AirTag for now, just so that we can kind of try it out. I've got one of the cheaper like keyring attachments for it on the way, just to give it a go and see exactly how the interface works, so we can talk about it a bit better on the show. So I at least have a clue how things are working. But I'm not sure at the minute. I know my wife loses her keys a lot more than I do, so that's probably where the AirTag will live most of the time. So we've got it engraved for her. But you know, if we can find a compelling use case for it, I'm quite happy. And I think Apple have done a really good job in terms of the pricing. So I think the Samsung was like $40.
Yeah, they're 13. Yeah, 40, and Apple's are 30. So
which is like
it's certainly lower than people expected. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I remember people saying like $35 or something. So yeah, it's undercutting the competition, and it's one of those rare moments where Apple is like the cheaper option.
Well, I'm sorry, but this is becoming the norm.
It is becoming the norm. Like, yeah, it is becoming the norm.
You try and build something that performs as well as a Mac Mini with M1 for that money, it's almost impossible.
Yeah,
and even if you can, and even if you can build something that performs the same way for the money, it's going to be noisy, it's going to be hot, it's going to take up a lot more space on your desk. Like that's impressive. There's pretty much no better notebook out there to buy than the MacBook Air right now.
Yeah, you've obviously seen my render setup, right? And so this costs like almost twice as much as the Mac Mini. All right, and you've seen how like huge and ugly it is, and how noisy it is. So thinking about the and the Mac Mini is faster. We've done
it's about in line actually. Yeah,
like Geekbench wise, it's like 1,000 points faster, and it certainly translates into real world performance, where it's like a second and a half and 2 seconds at a time faster per frame rendering and Blender. So half the price, and even if it is the same performance, but you're getting the same performance for half the price, it's one hell of a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think when we get to an M1X, which hopefully won't be very long, I'm still holding out for May. I'm still holding out for May. Tim said at the end of that event, he said, and we'll see you again soon. I think May is sooner than June.
I know maybe,
soon and June rhymes, but that's not what he was going for.
Well, so have they had like a May event before, or is this going to be?
But they've also never had September, October, November in a row.
Yeah, before. And they've never had like an April event in the last 10 years.
No.
But, no. So anything is possible in the world of Apple now.
They've also not introduced a whole new a whole new architecture for their chips in the past 10 years. They've also not. There's so much that's different right now.
What I imagine the sort of event schedules now being April, May, June, if your prediction is true, and then September, October, November. So we can have like 2 sets of events.
Yeah, Jim's just saying in the chat now, I hope M1X graphics is as fast as a 1080 Ti, otherwise I'll wait for M2. So just to be clear, Jim, M2 is probably going to be slower than M1X, just in terms of the way that these chip architectures are working, the way that we expect. The M1 is 4 efficiency cores and 4 Firestorm cores, the Ice Storm cores and Firestorm cores. The M1X we're expecting to be 8 of the Firestorm high-speed cores and double the GPU performance from the M1, whereas the M2 is going to be back to 4 of each cores and an 8-core graphics GPU, but each of the cores will be slightly faster. So you'll get faster single-core performance, but you'll get lower overall performance than the X series chips, is what we expect. Like, we don't 100% know, because Apple could just completely change their minds and just go, yeah, well, we're going to do M1 like this, and then M2 is going to be 12 cores of this and 1 core of
Yeah.
efficiency. We don't know, but that's the most likely path that we see at the moment.
Looking at the past, yeah. So this just seemed the most likely. I remember we did like estimating M1X performance on your channel, right? Where we calculated
Back
the
in
CPU
November.
score. Yeah, yeah. So I have it open right here. I don't know.
Cool.
So it says for the 12 core, like 8 performance and 4 efficiency cores, we have a Geekbench of 13,500.
Yeah.
And then the 20 core with 16 performance and 4 efficiency cores, it's 23,000. So this is not graphics, right? I didn't calculate the
Yeah, I
graphics.
did the graphics.
So I don't know if you remember what you calculated, but it was certainly for I remember the 128 core, right? It was the fastest GPU, or
So
on par with the 3060, I think.
yeah, so I've managed to find those notes here. Let's have a quick look. In terms of graphics, we were looking at right, M1X. Sorry, this. I'm sure this is great streaming right now. Geekbench for that was going to be Luke Miani's Geekbench for it was 13,586. My one that I'd done before was about 14,000, I think, that I'd calculated, but I'd used a different way of doing it. And then in terms of the GPU, why have I not written this down? Yeah, I got 14,193 in Geekbench. That was multi-core, and now I'm trying to look down here. Oh, so for the M1X GPU performance, we were looking at 38. Sorry, yeah, 38,776 on metal score. So let me just double check what that means in terms of where that sits with other stuff. So 38, because that was basically 75-ish% faster than the current one by doubling the cores. So we got Geekbench.
So he wants to know about a 1080 Ti, right?
Yeah. Geekbench metal scores. So 38,000 puts it.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So it's above the Fire Pro D700s, which we used to get in the Mac Pros. It's about where's the 1080 Ti? It's 38,000. An NVIDIA Titan XP is 41,000.
All right. So we were in the vicinity, I think.
That's where we're talking. Same as kind of Radeon HD 5700X, which I don't know what any of these mean because I'm a Mac person. But yeah, that's the kind of ballpark we're talking about. Radeon Pro 5300, that kind of level. But yeah, a 1080 Ti is 30,600. So it'll be about 25% faster than a 1080 Ti.
Yeah, well,
that's our assumption.
So for Jim, who was asking this, we did all of this for you, all right?
Yeah. So Tim Beaton, what if there will be no M1X, but the X variant appears on the M2 series with ARM v9? So this is something that's a little bit of a misconception, and I kind of assumed slightly wrong. It looks like based on what Rennie Ritchie's been talking about recently, but the ARM v9 instruction set, there will be some improvements, but most of that stuff is already the stuff that's been built into the way that Apple has been doing their stuff, because they started off using ARM v7, I believe, for their first chips for the A4.
Yeah, ARM v7.
Yeah, the A7 was when they went up to V8, which was the 64-bit. That was for the iPhone 5S, which is when they first 64-bit. And then from there, they kind of went all the way up to... They basically branched off a lot from the instruction set. So they license the architecture, but then they kind of do their own stuff with it, with all the extra cores that they add, and a lot of like things like their hypervisor and some of that other stuff is their own ISP, as far as I know. That's my understanding of it. Again, not a systems architect. I'm trying my best. to understand. But the 30% increase that you would get from going directly from ARM v8.2 or 8.3, which they're on at the moment, which is I think what Samsung uses in their Exynos chips, up to v9 will definitely help them, and Apple will get some benefit from it, but it won't be as much as they were expecting from the other stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where we're seeing. Given that M1 was being developed before the v9 release, yes, Tim. The difference here is that because Apple was one of the founders of ARM, they probably had access to kind of ahead of time.
Yeah, of course they do.
Stuff. They would have been looking at this for a long time. They won't have been just
they would have had
dumped
early
on
access to the architecture, and of course they did all of their engineering on it with their own silicon engineering team. I think then ARM mass produces it for them, but the design goes from Apple.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they design their own cores, which if you look at what Qualcomm do, they use Cortex cores, which are the ARM designed cores, and assemble them into their own chips. So that's why the 888, yes, I will, mate. Right, I'm gonna have to wrap this up because I need to go and do some insulin for my son. So thank you everyone for joining us. Sorry, it's a bit of an end to it, but if you've got any questions, leave them down in the chat. Leave them in the comments section, and we will hit them up in iCave Answers. So thank you very much, guys. See you later on. Speak soon.
Yep.